Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Diego with my beautiful wife, Karina. And on April 19th, 2026, I took Karina to the USS Alabama, BB-60, and the USS Drum, a battleship of history, a battleship from American history. And we hope you're doing well with your K-1 visa process and your spousal visas and your green card applications. We are here to help you. It's important that you got to keep documenting all your evidence of your trips and travels and experiences with your foreign national, new husband, wife, or fiance in whatever country she's in. Now, after entering service, the USS Alabama was deployed briefly to strengthen the British home fleet, whatever that is, and was tasked with protecting convoys to the Soviet Union, which is kind of interesting, right? In 1943, she was transferred to the Pacific for operations against Japan. Now, the first of these was called the Gilbert and Marshall Islands Campaign. So this ship was was fighting in World War II. That began in November of that year. Now, while the USS Alabama was operating in the Pacific, she served primarily as an escort for the Fast Carrier Task Force to protect other aircraft carriers from surface and air attacks, which she can do, quite obviously, from this historic video. Okay? Now, she also frequently bombed Japanese positions in support of amphibious assaults. Not now, ladies and gentlemen. This was in World War II. The Japanese are our friends now. Now, she took part in the Mariana and Palau Islands campaigns in June through September, and the Philippines campaign in October through December, and then she went into a refit in early 1945 and returned to the fleet for operations during the Battle of Okinawa. Now, the USS Alabama also assisted in Operation Magic Carpet after World War II, carrying some 700 men home from the former war zones, and then she was decommissioned in 1947 and assigned to the Pacific Reserve Fleet, okay, where she remained until 1962, when she was then stricken from the Naval Vessel Register. A campaign to save the ship from the breakers' yard succeeded in raising the necessary money, and the USS Alabama has been preserved as a museum ship in Mobile Bay, Alabama at Battleship Memorial Park. And if you're heading west from Interstate 10, you will look for exit 30, drive in, pay a $5 parking fee, and then the actual price to enter the USS Alabama. It depends on whether you're a veteran. If you're active duty military, it's free. For us, being a retired military, I think it was $33 for both of us. It was a very, very cool tour. And Karina got to explore a U.S. Navy battleship in Alabama. And I tell you, she learned a whole bunch of new things about our military. That's for sure. Now, the USS Alabama is 680 feet long, or for those folks watching us in Europe, 210 meters, and has a beam of 108 feet squared, okay, which is 32.97 meters, and a draft, which is up and down, of 35 feet, 1 inches, 10.69 meters. She displaced 37,970 long tons, okay, as designed, and up to 44,519 long tons at a full combat load. This was a very, very cool tool. I recommend it. The ship was powered by 4 General Electric steam turbines, and Karina got to go down to the engine room in this video, and each driving 1 propeller shaft using steam provided by 8 oil-fired Babcock and Wilcox boilers. So it's steam powered, okay, with diesel. Rated at 130,000 shaft horsepower, 97,000 kilowatts of electricity, the turbines were intended to give a top speed of 27.5 knots, or 50.9 kilometers per hour, or 31.6 miles per hour. That's pretty fast considering how heavy the ship was. And the ship had a cruising range of 15,000 nautical miles, or 28,000 kilometers. I felt like we drove that when we went to visit. It was a long haul, but well worth the trip. Okay. She carried 3 Voight OSU-2 Kingfisher float planes for aerial reconnaissance, which were launched by a pair of aircraft catapults on her fantail, which, the back end of the ship. Her peacetime crew numbered 1,793 officers and enlisted men, but during the war the crew swelled to 2,500 souls. Now, the ship was armed with a main battery of 9 16-inch 45 caliber Mark VI guns. Here's Karina checking out some of these guns in 3 triple gun turrets on the center line, 2 of which were placed in a super firing pair forward with the 3rd aft. The secondary battery consisted of 25-inch 38 caliber dual-purpose guns mounted in twin turrets clustered amidships. Very interesting stuff, right? 5 turrets on either side. As designed, the ship was equipped with an anti-aircraft battery of 12 1.1-inch 28mm guns. Okay. Very interesting, but she was completed with a battery of 6 quadruple 40mm guns before in place. Bofar guns is what they were called. Of the 1.1-inch guns and the 35 20mm Oerlikon autocannon in single mounts instead of 50 caliber guns. Karina's here walking up the stairs, checking out the. It looks like we were looking at the dining room area for some of these folks. The beds for some of the. This is the officers' quarters right here. The officers enlisted obviously had different sleeping arrangements. The officers having very fancy beds, and the enlisted pretty much cooped up in this kind of a setup. No problem though, right? It's not a problem. These guys were strong. They were motivated, highly intelligent, and ready to protect the United States of America, especially during World War II. Now, the USS Alabama, she was decommissioned on the 9th of January 1947 at the Naval Station in Seattle, which is in Washington State, and was assigned to the Pacific Reserve Fleet, stationed in Bremerton, Washington State. Now, plans were drawn up during the period she was in reserve to modernize the Alabama and other ships of her class, and should they be needed for future active service. In March of 1954, a program to equip the 4 ships with secondary batteries consisting of 10 twin 3-inch 76mm guns was proposed, but the plan came to nothing. I guess it was too expensive. Another plan to convert the ship into a guided missile battleship arose between 1956 and 1957, but the cost of the conversion proved to be prohibitive. Very expensive to do that. She would have had all 3 main battery turrets removed and replaced with twin rim 8 Talos missile launchers forward, and 2 rim 24 Tartar missile launchers aft, anti-submarine weapons and equipment to handle helicopters, and the cost was projected to be around $120 million back then. Now, Karina gets her welcome aboard pamphlet, and we basically explored the interior of the ship and the exterior of the ship. And if you get an opportunity to visit this very historic naval vessel, I recommend you do it. Very interesting, and we had a fantastic tour. Karina really enjoyed exploring the inside, although when we went into the engine room, she didn't really care for the smell and the noise. They had something running down there, and she got to experience what it was really like to be on a naval ship. Now, on June 1st, 1962, the USS Alabama was stricken from the Naval Vessel Registry for disposal. In other words, turn it into razor blades, with the ship slated to be broken up into little pieces. But the state of Alabama passed a bill to establish the USS Alabama Battleship Commission with a view towards preserving this battleship as a museum ship. And Governor George Wallace signed into law on the 12th of September 1963, and the commission set about raising money to acquire the ship, ultimately around $800,000. That's pretty cheap for back, but that's over, what, 60 years ago. That's how much money was raised, of which an eighth of this money came from children in the state. Children, little children raising money, probably Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, etc., and the rest of the money coming primarily from corporate donations. So, corporate America saved this battleship alongside the children of the state of Alabama. The history of this ship is unprecedented, and we enjoyed touring, exploring, sticking our heads into crevices and crannies, and climbing into gun mounts, exploring the interior of the ship. And now it was a cold day in Alabama. It was pretty cold, pretty drizzly, a little rainy. So there wasn't a whole bunch of people on the ship at this day when we went as a tourist. So on the 16th of June 1964, the Navy awarded the ship to her namesake state. The U.S. government gave the ship from payment from those funds raised to the state of Alabama, with a provision that the Navy would retain the ability to recall the ship to service in the event of an emergency. The USS Alabama was formally handed over on the 7th of July, 1964, during a ceremony in Seattle, and she was then towed to Mobile, Alabama, which is where we drove to, and the Alabama to be restored as a museum, which she is, and by the way of the Panama Canal. So she got towed through the Panama Canal. And here's Karina exploring the engine room of the USS Alabama. She was like, "Wow, what a place this is." On the way to the Panama Canal, one of the tugboats accidentally sank. Whoops! And the ship's screws were removed for the voyage to avoid any damage. The carrier, Lexington, a veteran of the Fast Carrier Task Force and was still in service at the time, escorted the ship while she was towed through the Gulf of America, then the Gulf of Mexico, now the Gulf of America. And the USS Alabama arrived in Mobile, Alabama on the 14th of September 1964, having traveled some 5,600 nautical miles, the longest tow of a naval vessel, ever. So the USS Mobile arrived into Mobile Bay in Alabama, ready to enter her permanent berth, but it hadn't yet been completed, and the ship had to wait until the end of the month before dredging work was finished. Once the ship was moored in her berth, work began in earnest to prepare the ship for visitors, including sandblasting, painting surfaces, applying primer, and then repainting the entire ship. And the museum was then opened on the 9th of January 1965. And in the early 1980s, the Navy reactivated 4 Iowa-class battleships, and parts were cannibalized from the USS Alabama and other preserved battleships, including the USS Massachusetts and North Carolina, to restore the Iowa-class ships to service. Now, the engine room components, that were no longer available in the Navy's inventory, accounted for most of the material removed from these ships, including the USS Alabama. The ship was declared a National Historic Landmark in 1986, and during her career as a museum ship, the USS Alabama has been used as a set for several movies. This ship was in the movie Under Siege in 1992 and USS Indianapolis, Men of Courage in 2016. Now, the USS Alabama was also damaged during Hurricane Katrina, which hit New Orleans severely and affected this ship also. But Karina and I, we had a great time. And she is pointing out, watch your steps. He's telling me, watch my step. I got a camera in my hand and I'm trying to walk down this. But remember, I spent 20 years in the U.S. Navy, so I'm used to going up and down these kind of ladder wells. To me, it was no big deal. Now, after exploring the USS Alabama, we then went ahead and climbed up onto the USS Drum, a submarine from World War II. And Karina had a great time. She went inside the USS Drum with me behind her, trying not to trip over things as I was holding on to the camera, making sure that we got some good video for you guys. Here she goes down into the USS Drum and entering the inner workings of this World War II submarine. She was extremely interested, and here we are. She's in the forward torpedo room looking at the torpedoes, although nowadays we have a lot more modern technical military hardware, including Tomahawk missiles and Mark 48 torpedoes, which obviously they didn't have back in World War II, and they probably could have used them, right? Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we hope you enjoyed this video. Diego and Karina exploring the USS Alabama in Mobile, Alabama, and the USS Drum, a submarine. Up there in the background, there is the city of Alabama, Mobile, Alabama. And Karina, she just was so excited to get to explore a part of American history. Over in the foreground there, you can see a SR-71, and there's so much to see at this museum. It wasn't sufficient time to put it all into one video. We hope you are hanging in there and being patient in your K-1 visa green card applications. Remember, the secret to a successful K-1 visa and green card is patience and qualifying for the benefit. Don't forget, I do a live stream Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays at 6 p.m. Central Time, and Karina and I look forward to helping you get your K-1 visa and green cards approved. I've got 13 years experience doing this, but I'm not an immigration attorney. I don't give you any legal advice, and I don't work for USCIS. And we will see you at the next live stream. Thanks for watching.